Tatum, or BT, engaged in some serious BS in a recent interview, and we really need to talk about this. People ask how an old codger like me stays in shape. The fact is, 80% of being healthy is what you cram or don't cram into your pie hole. You've probably already heard of the ketogenic or keto diet. To sum it up, it's a high-fat, moderate protein, low-carb diet that forces your body to burn fat rather than the glucose or simple sugars that so many people are addicted to. The bottom line is this kind of diet works. And I use Keto Elevate because it's specifically designed to help quickly and efficiently raise your ketone levels so you can reap the major benefits of the keto diet lifestyle. And guys, this isn't just an ad. This stuff really works. Use my link in the description, ketowithflix.com, and get 51% off while supplies last. This is an incredibly important video because one of the major problems in America and the world today is people who have the perception that there are those among us with more power and authority than the rest of us have, who have more rights than we have, who can get away with things that we can't simply because they wear a costume and a badge. If the problem in our world is that there are evil people doing evil things to others, and I agree that is our fundamental problem, then it doesn't seem rational that the answer to that problem is to give some of these evil people a monopoly on force, power, authority, and even violence. As a matter of fact, if the history of politics and policing has taught us anything, it's that the perceived power of each attracts the worst and corrupts the best. In this video, Dr. Rashad Ritchie has invited former officer Brandon Tatum onto his show to discuss police accountability and reform in America. The springboard for the discussion looks like it's H.R. 7120, also known as the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act of 2020.
Welcome to the bullpen. Policing in the United States of America. Obviously, there are some problems. Obviously, the vast majority of Americans believe police reform needs to take place. But I want to specifically start with a policy discussion about police reform. One of the largest bills is the George Floyd Policing and Accountability Act. Passed the House, stalemate in the Senate, likely not to get passed because of the political tribalism that exists currently in DC. But it has some good stuff in it. And I want to see, do we actually agree on the policy or do we disagree on the policy? So do you support any of the policy mandates of the George Floyd Policing and Accountability Act?
Well, I haven't read through the entire policing and George Floyd Act, so I haven't read through it, so I can't really give a comment necessarily on that particular bill.
Normally, I'd give people a pass on this. Like most bills they try to pass into laws, this one is long and verbose. H.R. 7120 is 138 pages long. But I'm not giving Brandon Tatum a pass on this because number one, this is his job. This is what he does. This is his area of expertise. He should know this stuff. Number two, when somebody invites you onto a show and you take them up on their offer to appear on their show, they usually tell you what they're going to talk about so you can do a little research on your own and come to the show prepared to address the specific issue. Now, it could be that this Ritchie character didn't inform Tatum on what they were going to talk about, but I really doubt that because when you invite somebody onto your show, you want to have a good, intelligent conversation. You want to bring out facts and you want to state your own assertions. The question was, do you support any of the mandates of this resolution?
Do you support any of the policy mandates of the George Floyd Policing and Accountability Act?
Now, right off the bat, only 17 pages into this thing, it's to be rejected on the basis that the resolution calls for the allocation of $750 million. Number one, that's further theft of the American people, which is immoral. And number two, We can't afford it. Number 3, man-made laws make us less free. They always have, and they always will. As for the policies, Tatum wouldn't have had to read the entire bill. Just skim the highlights. While there are a lot of policy mandates in this, let's just take a look at a couple of them. Grant power to the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division to issue subpoenas to police departments as part of pattern or practice investigations into whether there's been a pattern and practice of bias or misconduct by the department. First of all, granting power is a fiction that needs to be exposed and eradicated. Even if there was such a thing as granting power, which no ordinary man has the power to do, and we're all ordinary men, the last entity on earth that you would want to grant such power is the Injustice Department. Here's the problem. Agents, and I don't care if they're local, state, or federal, create the problem, and then politicians fleece the American tax cattle to correct a problem that will never be corrected. Because if cops don't follow laws that are already on the books, like 18 U.S.C. 241 and 242, and they trample over laws that they swore to uphold already, what gives anybody the lame brain idea that spending an additional $750 million is going to make them follow this new law? Here's another one. Provide grants to state attorneys general to, quote, create an independent process to investigate misconduct or excessive use of force by police forces. It should be obvious that this is going to be super expensive and eventually it's going to require even more funding. It always does. This is the politician's foot in the door to extract more money from the rest of us. Again, provide grants or any money is immoral because it's theft, and we're a debtor nation because of bills like this coming from the pens of politicians. We can't afford any more economic terrorism in the name of keeping police honest. Establish a federal registry of police misconduct complaints and disciplinary actions. Now, this sounds good, but guess what? We don't need a federalized anything. This is an appeal to further centralize power in the name of holding cops accountable. Guys, the thin blue line is and will always be the thin blue line. It's a big club and you and I ain't in it. The Fraternal Order of Police extends beyond local, state, and federal lines. They always look out for their own to the detriment of others, and every one of them acts as the enforcement arm of the politicians, even though the political class likes to act outraged when cops trample the rights of others. That's what they do. That's their job. It's all theater. Enhance accountability for police officers who commit misconduct by restricting the application of the qualified immunity doctrine for local and state officers, and by changing mens rea, that's intent, elements of 18 U.S.C. 242, the federal criminal offense of deprivation of rights under color of law, which has been used to prosecute police for misconduct from willfully to knowingly or with reckless regard. And this is exactly why we don't need another law. If they don't already obey the laws designed to restrain their actions in the first place, like 18 U.S.C. 241 and 242, we would be insane to think that they'll heed this new law that we can't afford, and that's absolutely immoral to implement. By the way, 18 U.S.C. 242 couldn't be more clear. Whoever, that includes cops, judges, and politicians, under color of any law, statute, ordinance, regulation, or custom, willfully subjects any person in any state, territory, commonwealth, possession, or district to the deprivation of any rights, privileges, or immunities secured or protected by the Constitution shall be fined under this title or imprisoned for any term of years or for life or for both, or may be sentenced to, yes, death.
Okay, let me read you some elements then, okay? And see if you agree or disagree with them on face value. The bill would lower the criminal intent standard from willful to knowing or reckless conduct in order to convict a law enforcement officer for misconduct in a federal prosecution. So basically, it would make the intent standard the same as anybody else in the world, okay? The intent would not have to be willful. It would also apply if it was knowing or if it was in fact reckless behavior that led to the deprivation of the rights of somebody else.
Creating another law like this is redundant and stupid. Natural law, as codified partially by 18 U.S.C. 242, deprivation of rights under color of law, already recognizes that every man and woman stands on an equal plane and no one can deprive another human of any rights for any reason. That's the simplest and really only answer.
Well, I really, in my opinion, based on being a police officer and being exposed to the things that police officers have to do on a day-to-day basis, I really think it's a dangerous path to go down when you have responsibilities that's not, available to the public. You have things that police officers are supposed to do, sworn to do, that are not the same responsibilities as members in the public, but yet you want to hold them equally accountable.
This is a common thought among the law enforcement and political community and people who buy the lie of statism, that some people have more rights than others. Even Dr. Ritchie here believes and acts in accordance with the belief that state agents have more rights than other people. I mean, look at his argument right here. He believes that political actors and the political class has the right to scribble words on paper, column laws, and penalize all who don't fall in line with the edicts on those papers. And it's the same with Tatum. He believes the law enforcement class should be judged by a different standard because they do things that others don't do. What you have here is a statist talking to another statist, how their brand of statism is better than the other's brand. Both of them are promoting the fiction of the state.
I really don't think that that's a good path to go down. Policing is a very nuanced thing. Police officers show up to a scene, things happen in split seconds. They're not God. So there's things that can go wrong, although a police officer may not have the intent for it to go wrong or may not be malicious. And so I think that the standard should be some level of protection for police officers when they're doing their job on duty. That does not protect police officers who are nuts, who are going out and shooting the wrong people and abusing people.
Yes, it does. Qualified immunity, which is what Brandon Tatum is arguing for here, does just that. It protects those special human beings with costumes and badges as they engage in depriving people of their unalienable rights. Or, as some would say, unalienable rights. A right that you can't put a lien on, that you can't limit in any way.
That's not, I don't even think that would somehow protect them. I mean, if you're clearly brutalizing a person that's not within the policies of the police department, that's against the law, none of those, change-ups in statute will help you. You should go to jail.
Tatum has proven time after time that he doesn't even believe that. He's produced many videos where the cop in question has clearly committed an evil act against a member of the public, and his pat answer is almost always, when an officer gives you what he calls a lawful order, you need to just submit to him no matter what. In other words, just give up your rights and fight it in court. For example, Brandon Tatum is the guy who said it was perfectly appropriate for a 40-something-year-old man to tackle a skinny little kid, straddle him, and punch him in the chest simply for attempting to buy tobacco products on the street. And he justified this clear case of child abuse because the 40-something-year-old guy who was straddling and punching the kid was wearing a costume and a badge and called himself a police officer. This is the level of cognitive bias that we're actually addressing here.
And let me ask you this question, because I do hear your point of view about policing is very dangerous. Well, number one, it's not the most dangerous profession in America by standards of injury and death. Cutting trees is the most dangerous profession in America by way of actual injury and death. But the special protections apply to policing, and the defense you guys give is that it is the most dangerous profession in America when that is factually untrue.
Well, I mean, you can't make those comparisons. Cutting trees and going to the domestic violence call is two different things. Driving a taxi cab versus driving at 90 miles per hour in a high speed chase or coming to save somebody's life. Those are two different things. You say special immunity. A police officer is not somehow judged on this subjective idea of them having a fear of life and death. That's not even in the statute. That's not even on the police protocol. Police protocol says that a reasonable person, that it's reasonable that you fear for your life. You can't just walk out somewhere, see a black man walking down the street, and because he's black, you just shoot him in the back of the head, and you say, well, I was afraid because I was in the hood. That's not the way it works. You have to pass the test of saying, would a reasonable person be in fear of serious bodily injury and or death? And if that is the case, and the police officer is judged before a jury, then that person is convicted or not convicted. And maybe the prosecution, the state won't even take the charges up if they don't feel like it's enough meat there.
This is a ridiculous argument on both parts. First of all, occupational hazards can never be used as a justification to take away anybody's rights for any reason. Second of all, Tatum's last statement is just not true in the face of mountains of video evidence from cops' body cams. I'm left wondering if Tatum either has a super horrible memory, is just outright lying, or actually believes that cops murdering unarmed, non-violent people who are clearly doing nothing wrong is justified.
But I mean, you would have to name me a situation where a police officer somehow killed a person and used the defense that they was in fear for life and death, and there is absolutely no way that was true. I haven't seen one of those cases presented. But I mean, you would have to name me a situation where a police officer somehow killed a person and used the defense that they was in fear for life and death, and there is absolutely no way that was true. I haven't seen one of those cases presented.
Okay, how about James Boyd, Philando Castile, Kelly Thomas, Eric Garner, Daniel Shaver, Botham John? How about Johnny Wheatcroft, who, having done absolutely nothing wrong, was tased by cops in the groin 11 times?
So let me go ahead and correct you on the record. Number one, you're incorrect as far as the statutory language. The reasonableness is connected to case law. It's the interpretation of the officer's ability to kill someone based on them saying that they had a fear for their life.
An appeal to case law shows just how little people think about the supposed supreme law of the land, which is, supposed to be the Constitution.
And also the second part, that is problematic. And that's why the George Floyd Policing and Accountability Act says, let's take this standard and be reasonable about the standard. So let's include knowing, or let's also include negligence in the standard, because that is the standard that applies to every other person in the United States of America. I think that is fair. I don't think that should be considered a radical idea. That's a fair idea.
I agree with that part of what this guy is saying. It's fair to treat everybody equally regardless of the costume they're wearing or the dangers of the job or the color of skin or whatever.
Tell me the issue with having fairness. If you're going to be the chief accountability executive, right? You're the guy in charge. You are the chieftain of enforcing laws, and you yourself do not want the laws enforced upon you. Come on, brother.
Well, Dr. Ritchie, with all due respect, I disagree with you, and I think that you are not accurate about the burden of proof for a police officer having to explain whether they were in a life and death situation or whether or not they fear for their lives. Now, let's talk about this in a very layman's terms. If your neighbor, just say he's a male and he has his girlfriend over and he's beating her up, you don't have any obligation at all to show up, to assist her, to help her, to get involved at any measure. A police officer is in a very different situation where if a man is beating up a woman, he has to respond and have to respond adequately.
In the context of following their own laws, which is the foundation Brandon Tatum is coming from, this statement is false. There are a lot of Supreme Court cases that deal with the nuance of this issue, but two cases really stand out. Gonzalez versus Castle Rock, Colorado, and DeShaney versus Winnebago County. They set the high court's legal precedent that cops, contrary to what Tatum says, are just like everybody else in that they have no obligation to protect a member of the public. In the case of Gonzalez versus Castle Rock, even a member of the public who has a restraining order out on a particular person.
And has a lot of responsibility when it comes to de-escalation, have a responsibility when it comes to use of force. You can't just go out and just beat people up.
This is coming from a guy who said time and time again that when he was a cop, you never came against B. Tatum because those who failed to comply lost miserably. I've done several videos on this guy, showing from his own words that he endorses state-sponsored violence of individuals who neither harmed nor threatened to harm nor stole anybody's property.
You can't do that as a regular citizen.
Come on, brother.
As a police officer, you have a duty to apprehend people who are suspects with using a reasonable amount of force necessary to execute an arrest. So you are living in a different environment and have different responsibilities as a police officer versus a citizen. That's why there's level of protection for police officers that are not available to citizens, because the duties are very different.
In my opinion, Tatum engaged in some major deception in this interview, and this was just the short version. I'll leave the short and the long version in links in the description and in the pinned comment. But what Brandon Tatum ended here with is another tip of the hat to qualified immunity. I want to hear your thoughts on this. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification icon, give it a thumbs up, share it with everybody you know, and don't forget to subscribe to my private email list through my website, highimpactflix.com. Also, join me over on BitChute and Odyssey. My PayPal account was terminated yesterday, so if you want to support the channel, you want to donate, use Patreon or Subscribestar or Bitcoin, or you can support the channel by buying one of these hard-hitting conversation-starting designs that you can get on any shirt, hoodie, mug, phone case, sticker, whatever. I'll see you guys in the next heavily censored shadow ban video.